Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to catch up with amazing humans that I've come across during my career and during my life. Today, I'm very happy to introduce Marc Caulfield to this conversation. Welcome, Marc.
Hi, Matt.
Hello
How are you
there.
this morning? You all right?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, very nice of you to ask. I'm doing very well, and it's even better for the fact that I'm recording another podcast. So welcome to the conversation. As I always do, I'm going to just do a very quick introduction to Marc, as I know Marc, and then I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and put the words around who you are and what you do. So Marc and I have known each other probably for about maybe 18 months or so. We managed to meet up at one point before all the lockdowns and everything else happened. But we both work in the world of mental health. We're both very passionate about the subject. We're both very passionate about supporting the conversation of mental health across, in particular, workplaces and other areas of society. And I know Marc's going to talk a lot about sort of the work he does and why he does it and his passions and so on. So we share a lot of commonalities, including the fact that we're both wearing dark hoodies today. It just happened to be we turned up and ready for action, wearing the same outfit. There you go. Who knew somebody was going to turn up wearing the same as me? So Marc, welcome to the conversation. Please do introduce yourself to the audience of this podcast.
I will. Hi, everybody. So I'm Marc Caulfield. I run a business called Demolish the Wall, which is a mental health consultancy that specializes in kind of workplace mental health. I just want to just briefly give you a bit of my work history, if you like, advertising business, which I started in 1989 and continued in that rather crazy world until about 4 years ago, probably. And I spent a lot of that time in the advertising agency arena, which anyone who knows, it's a pretty brutal place. It's a very much work hard, play very hard kind of situation. And I probably, of that time, I spent possibly the first 10 years or so, I absolutely loved it. It was absolutely brilliant. And then I kind of noticed that, my love for it started to change a little bit, which I think went hand in hand with perhaps, working incredibly hard, long hours. You'd often do 7-day weeks. You'd often do 15-hour days, and you were still expected to be out there entertaining clients in the evening. So it was this kind of melting pot of potential mental health damage, if you like. And I got to a point where I found some of the things that I used to love doing, which were things like this, actually, presenting, conference speaking, new business pitching, all of this sort of stuff that I loved, I started to really, really fear. I mean, really fear. And to a point, in actual fact, which I don't mind telling people, to a point when there were a couple of occasions in particular where if there had been a gun on that table at that time when I was doing that new business pitch, I would have taken that option. I got myself in such a state about it, and I could never really understand why that was. So, as you do, I continue doing it. You earn a lot of money in the advertising world. I had a big mortgage, I had a big lifestyle and all the rest of it that went with it. Perhaps far too much self-medication for my issues that were developing. But as is often the case here in the mental health space, you don't really know that there's something wrong until something quite major happens. And for me, this was really, it was centered around, it was a particular week at work where I was getting the train home in the evenings. And I think it was 5 or 6 days in a row, I burst into tears on the train. And I couldn't quite understand why. And it was all very embarrassing because I was a bloke and blokes don't do that. And, here I am, a board director of a massive agency earning shitloads of money. And, everything's brilliant in my life. Why would I possibly be feeling like this? And I had no real idea. But for me, that was really the time when I kind of went, I really need to do something about this because this is not right. And funnily enough, drinking more didn't actually help, and working harder didn't actually help, and partying harder didn't actually help. So I found myself in a situation where I felt I needed to do something. And actually, when I started to be honest and have a look at, I guess, where I'd come from, it wasn't surprising. My parents got divorced when I was 3. My mum then was with this amazing guy who to me was God for many, many years. And that went horribly wrong when I was 14. I've been divorced twice. You start to add these things together, and it's not vastly surprising that the wheels start to fall off. Plus, you're drinking too much, partying too hard, working too hard, too much stress. And somehow this self-doubt started to creep in. This whole, classic imposter syndrome, I'm going to get found out. I'm no good at this. I can't believe I've done so well. It's ridiculous. Are these people that stupid who have hired me? That is the thought process that was going through in my head. Sure. And in reality, these people are smart, really, really smart people. I'm a board director of the biggest agency in the world. I'm probably quite good at what I do, but I didn't think I was. And so that's kind of where I got to. And it's really where, when I started seeing a therapist, was just after these kind of crying incidents. And to be fair, it took me 5 or 6 attempts to find a decent one, or to find one who I connected with. But when I did, it was absolutely game-changing for me. This woman knows more about me than anyone else ever will. It was just fantastic to have this really, really safe place where I could say whatever I wanted. Now, that went on for 5 years. It was a kind of a 3.5 year process at first. I then had a break for a while, and then I went back for another kind of 1.5 years, and just fantastic. And that is when I got a real interest in mental health. And I started to look back at why I'd got to that position. And yes, some of it was my fault. Absolutely. Some of it was I chose things to do are probably not the best thing to do. All right. However, the reality is what I saw time and time again was CEOs effectively using people as a pawn in a game to make their bonus. All right. And the amount of times that I'd had conversations with bosses of mine of, so-and-so over there working in that team there, they're struggling a bit, aren't they? Is this really for them? Do you think we should just, manage them out? And it just struck a chord with me to think, you cannot use people, push them until they break, chuck them out and get a new one. That's just not acceptable. Right. And the fact that lots of businesses talk about people as assets is a massive problem. An asset is something you own. An asset is a phone, a house, a car. It is not a human being. And I had a real problem with that. And I felt, things need to change. So I then got together with an old mate of mine who's another old advertising guy, a guy called John Waters. And we started talking about an idea. We started talking about an idea of a business, and that is where Demolish the Wall came from. Demolish the Wall, the name behind it was really, we went to a conference early on in our kind of early days to try and get a really good handle of what we were going into. All right, because we had lots of personal experience, but we didn't know this world particularly well. And someone there who was a child psychologist was standing up talking about the role of abuse in damaged mental health in future life. And they talked about this wall of silence that surrounds mental health. And so we thought, that's the name. That's it. We're going to demolish that wall. So that's where the name came from. And it really, our business, it's a bit like yours, Matt, but it's really centered around kind of, I suppose, 3 main tenets, if you like. One is about building awareness of mental health in the workplace and why it's so important and why we've got in the situation we are and why stigma still exists and why all of these things. That part's becoming less and less now because everyone's aware of it. Yeah. What we focus on much more now is about really tangible people training. Yeah, so really focusing very, very, very much on people managers within within an organization who are responsible for people, hiring, firing people, promotions, pay rises, actually looking after people. Because one of the things that I've always felt very, very strongly is the way that business works. You've got this hierarchical structure that works, right? So if you're here, you're like a junior manager and you want to be a board director, whether you like it or not, you have to go through this ridiculous charade of, well, now I have to manage people,
Yep.
I have to manage a team, and now I have to manage a P&L, and then eventually I might get on the board. But actually, why do you have to go through that process? Because there are people out there who cannot manage, do not want to manage,
Yep.
are incapable of it. And lots of people will argue with me. I don't believe you can teach man management skills. I think you can hone them. I think you can improve them. But I don't believe you can take someone who is not a people person and make them capable of effectively managing people, is my personal view. And what you find is people are constantly put in this position because they're ambitious and they want to move up the ladder. And so what you're finding is people who are great at the craft skill. So let's take an architect's firm, for argument's sake. Yeah, you can be a fantastic architect. How does that mean you can manage people? I mean, it really doesn't. It's got nothing to do with that. And so we work quite heavily with organizations in order to get them into a position where people managers know how to manage people effectively and know how to, spot those signs of difficulty in people and themselves. Because it's quite funny how I still get people, despite having been divorced twice, I still get people asking me for marriage advice. I'm in a real problem here, Marc. What do you reckon I should do? Why are you asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I tell you
what.
I will tell you. I'll tell you what to do, and you do the opposite, and you should be all right. But my point is that people are much better at recognizing issues in other people than they are themselves.
Yeah.
And I think, it's quite important if you've got people in management positions that they are equipped to do it. And I don't think most managers are, quite frankly, from what I see. And so that's a lot of our work centered around ensuring people are clued up on that. They know how to spot the signs. They know how to listen to people effectively. They know how to have those conversations, which are really, really difficult, as we all know, and they know how to act. And then I guess our third kind of main tenet is really centered around ensuring organizations are focused on what their responsibilities are. Okay, so that's a lot of legal work and legal compliance and policies and procedures and things like that. Because what you tend to find is, some organizations out there are really decent people trying to do the right thing, but they can sometimes be a bit clumsy around things. And, too many people judge other people's ability to handle stress or their mental health in the same way as they do. Now, if you're a CEO or an MD of a successful business, it is likely you can handle more crap than other people can, just by the very nature of where you are. And I just think there needs to be a load of work around that and understanding where their legal responsibilities lie.
Yeah.
Because what you'll find is a lot of organizations have no idea. And a lot of HR professionals are not as clued up as they could be around mental health and things like health and safety, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what our business is about, really.
Brilliant. Well, what a great introduction. And you've shared so much in that, in terms of your evolution as an individual, as a human being. And that's what these stories is really about, is why do you do what you do now with the passion that you have for that subject? And actually what you've described is your lived experience has fueled this passion towards improving those moments, improving those experiences. Like I said at the beginning, it's a very parallel world that I think both of us has been on, when you think about where we've both come from, the roles we've both had, the positions where things changed and where it became much harder, and never addressing those challenges until the point of needing to address them, or there was no other alternative option. I do want to delve a little bit deeper into some of those, if that's okay, Marc, around your personal experiences with mental health, because you've obviously got a very compelling and a very deep story around it. Can you talk a little bit about the feelings that were going on, especially at those moments where you felt, you talked about being in that meeting? What was really going on in your head? Let's try to help the audience or the listeners to understand,
Sure.
'cause it's about connecting to that thought as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really, I think I always had this underlying feeling that I wasn't quite good enough.
Yeah.
All right. It was always there. All right. And it was often masked by self-medication, shall we say. I won't go into the details, but. And what I found was, when I was in an organization where I felt, and I'll just be completely honest here because it almost comes across as quite arrogant. I don't mean it to be, but this is the mental state I was in, where I actually felt superior to people. I felt I knew my stuff better than anyone. I would perform incredibly well.
Yep.
All right. The moment I was somewhere where actually I was more on an equal footing, I would start to doubt myself. And I would almost feel as if, it was almost this slight paranoia of people were actively trying to catch me out and kind of pick holes in things. So if I go back to this particular meeting, and it wasn't one, there were tens of meetings like this over a period of time. It was things like simple things, all right? So simple things like, when you go into a meeting, a big meeting, you got lots of people around the table and everyone has to introduce themselves. That is my worst nightmare, or certainly was then. And actually, often now, when I do a workshop, and in the good old days when you could do it in the same room, I would often not make people do that. And if one of the senior people in the client says, we're going to do this, I'd always say, you don't have to do that if you don't want to do that, because I know how it made me feel. It would put me in such a, and whilst it's easy to talk about, do something that challenges you, do something that, not if it's going to send you into a complete tailspin, but things like that it was almost like someone had grabbed me around the throat and was strangling me, and it was basically a panic attack. It was basically due to me feeling not great about myself, probably feeling a bit worthless. And the way that manifested itself very often was in a kind of almost like a blocking, like a vocal block. I couldn't actually speak. And it was awful. And, can you imagine being, a director of an advertising agency where your job is to present? That's what you do. New business pitches, you've got to be big and blah, 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 all the time. And you're at a point when you can't even say your own name. It's not a nice place to be. Wow. And so for me, it became obvious as I learned more about it. This was classic, extreme fight or flight, panic attack.
Yeah.
And it was genuinely felt like I was being strangled sometimes. And it was just hideous. And I can only put that down to those feelings of actually not believing you're good enough, feeling you're undermined by people, feeling just the pressure. It was something that I used to be really, really, really into sport when I was younger, and I rode to a very high level up until I was about 28, 30. And our coach always talked about us using adrenaline positively and how we could do that. Yeah. And I was very, very, very good at that. In the workplace, I lost all ability to actually harness that adrenaline for positive. It just was, was awful. So that's kind of how it manifests itself. And then it just didn't go away. So it would then go into, my general day-to-day work. It would be, trying to avoid things, trying to avoid speaking up in something. If there was a piece of new business that came into the agency and they were creating a pitch team for that, I would literally kind of hide in the back because I was desperate to not be picked. I'd have no problem doing the work on it and creating it and things like that. And it was only when I started to, I suppose, when I knew I was going to leave and when I knew I was going to go and do something different, I didn't know what it was. It was only then that all of that lifted. And then ironically, I then became really good at that again. And just sat there kind of going, it was so frustrating that this had almost, I felt it almost robbed me of my potential within that world. Quite frankly, now it's a godsend in actual fact, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. I'd still be in London, you know, hating every day of my life.
It's incredible. It's one of those pivotal moments of life, isn't it? And at the time it feels hard and difficult and challenging, and I think that's such a relevant point to all of these conversations, is that thought that says at some point in our lives there's going to be a moment that we're going to have to consider where we go now. Is it left? Is it right? It really is sliding doors, a lot of this, isn't it? And we would never know, of course, what the consequential outcome of the other option would be, because we don't have that as part of our, our visibility. But it is that then looking forward. You did a TEDx talk, and I will bring that into this conversation as well, around collaboration. I know in your introduction and the way that you presented yourself, so anybody that's listening, Marc's got a TEDx talk out there talking about collaboration, but you do talk about your experience of the workplace. And one note that I took from that was this thing about you were crippled with anxiety and depression, and public speaking became, you hated it, and you've said that very eloquently, you've put that into words. But then when you talk about something that you love, the passion came back. And you sort of, and I did a podcast recently, which was launched, just recently, about somebody who talked about rebirth. It's almost like the new version of you evolved from those crises, Phoenix from the flames, however you want to look at it. Do you feel that way with that? I guess from what I heard.
Well, I mean, if I talk about another experience, when I started Demolish the Wall, we worked together and we put together this presentation, okay, and we invited a load of HR professionals to Waverley Abbey House, which is a lovely little place near Farnham, and it was gorgeous. And so there we were on this day. We had put together this presentation. We were about to present to 20 HR directors, and I suddenly kind of went, fucking hell. Oh my God, I'm now going to speak to, I've been doing this 6 months. Do I really know what I'm talking about? But what was amazing, because I had put every single slide together, I knew this story inside out. This was from my heart. It was all centered around personal experience. I actually, just before people turned up, and I was really, really nervous, but in a good way. I was like, ready. I want to do it now, not in 5 minutes. I want to do it now. What I found was, because it was me, because all of that had come from me, I kind of thought, well, actually, no one can tell me it's wrong, can they?
No, never.
Because that's my view.
Yep.
You're entitled to your own view, and your own view may be really, really interesting, and I might take some stuff from that. But this is mine, and it's no one else's. And it was actually, when I stood up, it was like going back 15, 20 years without the artificial things helping me along the way. And I felt brilliant, and it went fantastically. And not one of those people had anything negative to say. They all thought it was great. And that, for me, was that moment that I thought, doing what you really care about, is the most important thing here. If you're passionate about what you're doing, you can do it really, really well. It's as simple as that. And I'd realized, my last client in the agency world was Talk and News International. All right. I really wasn't that passionate about selling broadband that didn't work to people. I wasn't really that passionate about selling the sun to people.
Yeah.
And actually, I realized that, so much time had gone. The passion of selling things for other people, possibly to people who didn't want it, had gone. And what it was about was, now, as a human being of, over 50 years old, having got a load of experience and a load of stuff that I've done, I can now tell people a bit of that. And actually, it's about time to believe in yourself and think, you know what, I've got something to add here, because I've done a load of stuff. I've been through a load of shit.
Yeah.
I'm still here. So that's kind of, that's sort of what I guess drove me, and it made me realize if you start doing things you're passionate about, life just changes radically for you.
Oh, I'm absolutely behind. It's exactly true, isn't it? And it's that having the ability to be authentic and genuine
Yes.
in a workplace, in a corporate environment. I understand, I've been there, you've been there. You have to comply. You have to be a certain type of person. You have to talk in a certain type of way. I often post. I
Yeah.
often post stuff out into the universe of social, and people come back and say, "I can't believe you said it," and I would love to be able to say that. And it's because we're under corporate shackles
Yeah.
often,
Oh God.
and it is, isn't it?
I mean, just awful. I mean, my view is I don't apologize for me to anyone.
No,
I am who I am.
yep,
I swear too much. I tell people how it is,
yep.
and I sometimes get into arguments with people, passionate arguments with people.
Debates, yeah,
But you know what? I don't think that's a problem. I think, the clients we work for, they really enjoy working with us,
yep,
and and some clients don't want to work with us, and that's fine. But you know what? I will never, ever, ever compromise myself again, and I will
no,
never work with people I don't want to work with. And I think that is the number one thing, to actually have that authenticity, which you talk about, to actually go, no, I'm not willing to do that.
yep,
I spent 25 years doing that. I'm not
yep,
doing it anymore. Is quite refreshing. I mean, when we started our business, we had I won't mention names for obvious reasons, but we had a conversation with someone, which was a big piece of work.
yep,
We had just started. We had ploughed every single penny we had into it, and we had someone who ran a big firm wanting to do some work with us, which was going to amount to 20, 30 grand probably when you added
yep.
everything together. And the first thing the CEO said to me in the first meeting was, I think I've got to do this, haven't I? It's a bit of a pain in the ass because I couldn't really give a shit about my people.
Wow,
And thankfully, I then closed my laptop and said, we're going to stop there.
you don't work with that. Yeah,
And it was one of the most pivotal moments in my career, because the amount of clients who I've had to work on before, who I hated, who were absolutely awful people, who treated members of my team appallingly, were just not good human beings.
yeah,
To actually be able to stand up and go, I'm not willing to take that. There is no, if you think I'm going to work with you when you've just told me you hate your people and you
yeah.
don't care about them, we're not going to do that. Now, I'll be honest, there have been some times in lockdown when I kind of gone, that would have been really handy.
Yeah, but
but
you compromised yourself then, and
but I would never compromise us.
no,
So yes, it was a difficult thing to walk away from. But you know what? We only want to work with businesses who genuinely believe their people are the most important
yeah.
thing.
And you can only drive that value through organizations that have that exact approach. I remember having conversations with executives who said, we don't have a problem with mental health. And that's only because they didn't see it. They weren't looking at it. They weren't understanding what was going on at the level where there was a lot of problems and challenges. I find it fascinating. We're coming to the end of this. This conversation is like, I love everything you've said, Marc. And I say that to it. Oh, yeah, I love everything that people, because it's a true representation from your experience. And you said it very clearly. We have our own ways of seeing the world, and it's not that yours is better or I should accept it. It's just that's your perspective, and I think that's just fantastic. And the work that you're doing with Demolish the Wall and helping organizations to break down that wall is such a critical point. We're going to close in a bit, but I do want to give you sort of the last words to say if there's anything you wanted to say. But from me, I just want to say a huge thank you, Marc, for taking the time to talk this morning. For anybody that's listening as well, Marc actually had a COVID test this morning, so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it comes back negative for you, Marc, as well. And all the very best with all of that, and for everybody listening, of course, stay safe and well. But last words from you, Marc. Anything you want to share, say, promote, whatever you want to do?
I would just say, I think one of the most important things that I've seen over the last probably 9 months, all right, is genuinely people being kind to each other, genuinely being decent people. You know, it is very, very easy in this world of Zoom. All right, whether it's your colleagues at work, whether it's your family or your friends, to take things on face value, because you can't see what people are doing. All right, you can see someone's face and they're talking to you, but you can't really read body language as well. So I think rather than just asking someone, are you okay? And then everyone says, I'm fine, because everyone does. I think you need to spend a bit more time delving into that and really, really understanding how people are. I think the whole world at the moment is a really tricky place. I think I've tried to create a very structured day for myself, which is difficult because I'm not a very structured person. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to allow myself an hour a day where I read. All right. Okay. Yep. I've got so many books on the go at the moment that I want to read, and I'm just going to sit somewhere else in my house, out of this office. Well, I say office, it's my kid's bedroom as well.
Multi-purpose. That's what life is now.
It is. Absolutely. Well, the best thing, just a tiny detour, is 3 weeks ago, I was doing a presentation for a care industry conference. All right. Okay. And my camera was on wide pan. I was down the stairs and my dog decided to drag her bed into the room and start humping it into the view of the camera. And there were about 200 people on this call. It was brilliant. Anyway, that's fine.
Comedy timing.
I would just say things like being present is really, really important at the moment. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing more people spending more time on social media than ever before. It's going to send you mad. You need to, when you are doing things, you need to be engaged. I think the most important thing is to talk to people, stay present, and be kind. I think that is what is key at the moment, because it's tough. Everyone's finding it tough. And that's probably it, guys.
Thank you, Marc. I appreciate it. Wise words, of course. And let's all be kinder to each other and let's be present. And before we started recording this, Marc and I were frantically switching everything off that would distract us. It's okay to say we're both like magpies. We see something shiny. Oh, shiny. So we switched everything down. As I always say at the end of these, if you are struggling, you do need extra help or support, feel free to reach out to me. It's absolutely fine. But Samaritans exists today exactly for that purpose. If you would like to talk to somebody, it might even be for the first time, talking about some of those worries or those concerns that you have, Samaritans is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can call them for free on 116-123. Please do feel that there is always somebody there to talk to. These conversations, it's just two people having a chat about life, talking about the journey they're on, and where we're going. And we're going to continue these conversations. So if anybody does want to get involved, Marc, I hope it wasn't too painful for you to get involved.
I loved it. I would happily do any of these. I love doing it. It's always nice to chat to you, mate. So
fabulous. And that's the invitation to everybody as well, of course. That's what these are all about. I love having time to do these, and I just think the more we can get through, fantastic news. So thank you, Marc. Appreciate it. I will say goodbye, and thanks for listening, everybody. And please do subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. I always forget to say that. I guess I should shamelessly throw that in there too, or whatever podcast channel you're using. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Bye. Cheers. Bye.